Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Zach Hubeck with Wave LLC. We are a distributor for Commscope, and this is your next edition of our AirWAVs podcast. I have Rich Nedwich on the line with me. Rich, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Afternoon, Zach. Glad to be here.
All right. So, folks, today is all about education. For a lot of schools in the U.S., this is first week of school or maybe second week of school. And I wanted to get Rich on the line because he is absolutely subject matter expert within Commscope in regard to education, K through 20. So we're going to have a great dialogue today with Rich, talk about some of the hurdles and challenges and what we can do as technologists to help schools through e-learning and learning in person during COVID times. And it is September 3rd, 2020 here. So Rich, welcome. Let the folks at home know who you are and what your role is at Commscope.
Sure. Thanks again for having me, Zach. Yeah, so my name is Rich Nedwich. I'm the Global Director of Education at Commscope. My job basically is to make sure I stay on top of the trends within the K-12 market, how they impact education, and how Commscope's products, technologies, solutions, and our partners are relevant in solving the challenges that come up from those trends.
That's awesome. Rich, I think I said K through 20. What was I thinking there? K through 12. K through 12.
Well, K-12 for primary, secondary ed. I actually do look after higher education as well. So sometimes we say K-20.
Awesome.
So who am I to correct you? You're on target.
I love it. I love it. Very cool. So with what's going on in the world with the pandemic, and as a global guy, it's really cool to have a global guy online because you get to see not only the U.S. market, but other geographies and regions and countries, which is really cool. I find that very interesting. But 2020 has been really transformative for schools and educational institutions. So if you could just run us through some of the things that you've seen at your level from challenges schools are encountering as they hit this new school year. What are you seeing at your desk, sir?
So let's focus. Yeah, I do have a global perspective, but I'll say first and foremost, everyone's going through these challenges right now, right? Globally, right? Everybody was shut down. Everyone was sheltering in place. Schools all over the world were shutting down, and schools and administrators and students and parents are all struggling with what is the soonest, safest way to get those kids back into school and get the parents back to work, right? And get instruction going again so we don't have a gap year in learning. And that's common everywhere. But what we're seeing now here in the States is a couple things. So it was a very difficult time when everything hit in March, April, and suddenly the schools were closed and we were thrust into distance learning, right? We're on Zoom calls, we're on Google Meets and Hangouts. And to say it didn't go smoothly would be a vast understatement, right? So a lot of folks nationally, state level, locally, and within the school districts have been working really hard for the last several months figuring out the best, safest way to accomplish two things. If we have to stay online, how do we improve that experience? How do we improve it both from a teaching and learning perspective? How does the pedagogy have to change, right? It's not just assigning things like you normally would and have someone log in and say hi to the teacher once in a while, but also the infrastructure that supports it. There's VPN connections, there's the software that's being used, there's the infrastructure that is being deployed at the homes as well as in the schools and outside of the schools to get those kids connected. So a combination of things going on, right? So how to get the schools ready for students coming back, and how to get teaching and learning ready when the students aren't coming back or when they're still at home during a phased reopening. So those are the two big things. And then what did we learn over the last few months? Digital equity really matters. And digital equity refers to, does every student have an equal opportunity for learning? And, we had phrases like the homework gap to address the challenge when some percentage of students, and, we can debate the total number or the total percentage, but I've seen numbers of like 15 to 20 million students in the US who either don't have access to reliable broadband connectivity at home or are underserved and can't effectively do their work. And so that's a problem. We can't teach to the 80%, 90% and leave the rest underserved. And so digital equity says we need an approach that means everyone has an equal opportunity to learn. And so what's the right way to solve it? How do we get broadband to those students and their families? How do we give them the right device? How do we make sure that they're participating in the teaching and learning? And that this today is still one of the hottest topics within K-12.
Yeah, I think quick anecdote on my side. So I have three sons, and this was first week of e-learning, and I've got fiber to the home, and 11:30 a.m. My wife calls me. My phone is blowing up. I've got 5, 6 texts, and the internet's down. And so a utility cut that fiber line in the neighborhood. Internet is down. I'm also the IT director at my house. Not only am I the VP of sales and marketing for Wave, I'm the IT director at my house. And so I scramble home and I'm firing up personal hotspots on cell phones and things like that. And as my day concludes and I'm licking my wounds at how horrible this is, I'm running through my Facebook feed and I see 2 kids sitting on a curb at a Taco Bell parking lot
I saw
with
that.
their one-to-one devices. And I'm sitting here like, wow, you jerk. You're feeling bad about this bad day you had because you had to go home and get your kids' personal hotspots fired up. Think about those children who just to even connect have to go to a public hotspot. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Rich.
It is,
And
and I have
brutal.
to, I hate to say this, but I saw that same article, by the way, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people chipped in through, I think, Kickstarter and gave those kids and their family a bunch of money to help out. So there was a
Yeah,
bit of a happy ending on that one. But a few months ago, they wouldn't have even been able to go to the Taco Bell,
true.
right? So everything was shut down, and kids who, again, the underserved community who couldn't connect at home, they would go to a Starbucks, a McDonald's, a library, somewhere, and everything was shut down. So they
Right.
literally they didn't even have a plan B.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yep.
I
So I
totally
think
understand what you're saying.
so. We've got a unique advantage point as Wave, or a unique vantage point as Wave, because we see on the indoor and the networking side of our business, there's all sorts of E-rate programs and one-to-one programs, making sure the students have connectivity and they have the right network at the school. And then conversely, when they go home after they leave that brick and mortar, which, as you stated, this was shut down, they couldn't even go there and couldn't even go to a place where they're normally a patron. Going home to mom and dad who may not be well off enough to have internet connectivity. From Wave's vantage point, there's all sorts of funding out there from the federal government, like RDOF and CAF and all of those things. So we do see the support there, but you are absolutely spot on that we still have this digital divide and the number of children still not connected. And given that same opportunity, I'm glad to see things are progressing toward that, and there's more federal funding coming, but we've got some work to do, man, for sure.
Yeah, we do. And I'm glad you mentioned E-rate. So a lot of schools do depend on E-rate, especially around 1 to 15,000 student enrollment schools, according to our own research at Commscope,
Okay.
rely heavily on E-rate. The larger districts have their own budgets, that they can apply, as well as taking advantage of E-rate funding. Smaller schools, under 1,000 students, they typically don't rely on E-rate if they feel like it's overly burdensome and they can't afford a consultant and it isn't enough money. I think this year may be different because we see that the government has upped the minimum and reduced some of the complexity about how money is allocated from school to school, and they're going to allow you to deploy across the district.
Got
Now
it.
that said, the challenge that I see right now, like for schools that applied and were funded last year, typically USAC has a goal of funding all the workable deals. 90% of them should be done by September 30th. And here we are at September 3rd, and we are nowhere near 90%.
Do you guys
Couple
have
of weeks
stats
ago,
on? Do you guys have stats on where everyone's at, as far as the funding is concerned?
yeah, well, I can tell you that as a couple of weeks ago, it was around 30 to 35%.
Holy cow!
Now, I've seen some progress over the last 2 weeks, but it isn't accelerating. It's been like a continuing drip. So I really don't know that we'll even get to 50% by September 30th. It's happening, right? It's just happening slower than we thought.
Got it. Do you see, Rich? Do you see an advantage of, with schools doing e-learning?
Mhm.
There's nobody at the building we're all worried about COVID and there's a lot of mask regulations and things like that. Do you see an advantage to the schools right now, even though there's a delay in the E-rate funding? Is it more of an advantage that no one is here in the building and you can come in anytime and do these installs as long as the money and the hardware is flowing? Do you see that as an advantage?
Yeah, practically speaking, it's easier to get the work done when there's no students around. Absolutely.
Yep.
Um, if you have a district that has been funded and is able to deploy, I think you as a partner for them should be making the case that now is a good time. Let me prove to you that my staff, my team is healthy and able to go in and get the work done quickly at an affordable price, and maybe offer to do other things for the
Sure.
school district, right? And I talk a lot about this internally with our team, and it's about showing empathy with those districts right now. They're, as I know we all are, and I know as our own channel partners have to deal with their own challenges as well. But these districts, right now they rely on the state for their funding, and the state coffers are drying up because we've had to shut down the economy. And
Yep.
so we fully expect that impact is going to continue to hurt teaching and learning for some time.
Sure. Understood. Rich, as we've watched kind of COVID evolve and we've seen E-rate play out, and these are good stats and things to know, are there other federal programs you've seen come to light or are available for schools and integrators that people need to know about?
Yeah, for sure. And um, I think most people involved in this space, and certainly those serving this market, might have heard of the CARES Act. And the CARES Act was a broad funding program, many tens of billions of dollars between higher ed and primary ed, among other things, to the state and state funding as well. Um, it includes within it something called ESSER grants. So basically, it's funding the states and the state educational agencies like the departments of education, and allowing them to, in turn, administer funding through a grant application process to their local education agencies, or LEAs, basically the school districts, right? And so now they can turn around and say, I'd like to do a project. And the types of projects they're doing are not the same necessarily as E-rate. It can be much broader than that. It can be connectivity to the home. It could be connectivity outdoors. It could be in the community. But it can be other things as well. It could be the software for teaching and learning and any number of other things, and often is. It could be professional development. It could be PPE. It could be any number of things. And that's a key piece. Because I hear this, we're so into our own tunnel of how can I afford this network infrastructure? How can I afford the structured cabling? How can I afford this connectivity solution? But when we talk broader funding, as you just mentioned, Zach, so there are other things that could be funded, and where it tends to come together is the at the budget office, the CBO's office. And so within the district, they know about these funding sources. They're going after these funding sources for some of the most visible, important projects for the administration. If you have a project you're working on with your district for uh, connectivity, for networking equipment, infrastructure equipment, and your services, it's really important that they communicate that back to the CBO office, because otherwise that money might get earmarked or allocated for something else first before you bring that project to them.
Got it.
Right. So I just want to put that out as an important caveat. So if you're
Sure.
looking to leverage CARES Act money, and many districts are, you got to make sure you raise visibility to the people who are allocating the use of that money among different projects.
Yeah, I think E-rate has very, very strict swim lanes. This is category one, this is category
Yeah.
two, this is the equipment within that. The CARES Act funding is certainly
Yep.
more of a broader stroke, if you will, if we're using a painting
Yeah.
analogy. Yeah,
And there's another aspect. You touched on another port. Like, is there important program things that you need to know about, and swim lanes, or pricing, or budget amounts, or deadlines. And deadlines are important things in E-rate as well as CARES Act. CARES Act is very funny in this regard, unfortunately, because it's a national program that's administered locally, unlike E-rate, which is just a national program, right? The rules are the rules. But here it's state by state, and it might even get more granular than that. when you get into the counties and the districts. So there are some districts that are telling me, and here in California, they need to spend money now. Like, you know, by September or October this year, they need to start spending stuff. And if there's money left over from the CARES Act, there'll be a second wave of CARES Act funding that might be due September 2021. Other states are already saying 2021. And for higher ed, the deadlines extend to 2022. So at the end of the day, I encourage everyone to basically just go to their state Department of Education website. There is I guarantee you there is a page dedicated to CARES Act funding with FAQs, et cetera. And if you
Awesome.
can't find it, I mean, we can always engage with folks directly and help them find it.
Love it. Very cool. Good advice.
Yeah.
So, Rich, we've covered funding as technologists. Are there some unique ways that we can help schools right now? Is there some things that you've seen from the Commscope team or even yourself personally? How can we help these folks out?
That's a really good question. You know, at Commscope, I have to say I'm really proud of the folks that we work with who are really engaged in. I call it empathetic selling, but what it really is putting yourself in the shoes of your customer and understanding what they're going through. So we have a COVID relief program, among other things, that we try to bring forward so as many people can benefit from it as possible, our partners as well as our customers. We do a number of things to help provide relief. If I'm being honest and talking to someone who's going to go serve this market, you're going to go call in a district tomorrow, what can I talk about? It needs to be something as basic as how can I help you? And you know, ears open. Now, you know what you're good at, you know what you carry in your bag, but at the end of the day, you know, you got to listen to what they need. If they say, look, I'm installing soap stations and sanitizer stations in the classrooms, or I'm putting signs down, I'm putting tape on the floor, but you know, I don't have anyone to do it, raise your hand and offer to do it, right? You build that good karma, right? Build that, invest in that relationship. And believe me, they will remember you, right? They will remember that you're the guy, Tom from so-and-so, who came in and helped me when I really needed it. And now I've got this project coming and I'm going to call Tom, right? Before I ask what the price is, I just want to know because Tom's a good guy and Tom helped me out.
Right.
Can he help me out with this project? Now, the kind of projects I'm hearing about that I think are really interesting now that are catching on and sort of happening in more broadly involve connecting the kids and the community outside the classroom, because still so many schools are closed, or they tried to open and closed again, or they're phasing their reopening and there's a lot of users not inside. And so we're seeing a lot of requests for outdoor connectivity. And that could be something like a park and learn in the parking lot of the school. It can be something called like drive-fi, which is Wi-Fi drive-through a library parking lot. You just want to get in, connect for an hour, get your work done and get out. And those are very straightforward. It can be an outdoor access point. It can be, you know, hybrid fiber cable to power it, or an outdoor switch to power it. It's something very straightforward. It can even be a complete adjunct to whatever network that they have running inside the school district that just needs something to work. It could be cloud managed, would make it really simple.
Got it.
We had a lot of so we did an outdoor AP program, and hundreds of school districts, I just checked, like over 200 school districts took advantage of it to provide some outdoor connectivity, just basic connectivity.
Nice.
That's one. And then the second one, which I think is really interesting, in fact, I think it even got coverage in USA Today, is school bus Wi-Fi. And you're like, what's school bus Wi-Fi? Like, well, if you think about it, for the most part, the school buses aren't being used now, right? And so normally you'd want to have a school bus full of children going to and fro from school. But instead of that now, the kids are at home and the school buses are idle and the drivers are unpaid and unused. So the idea here is get the drivers and the buses out there, equip them with connectivity. Like we happen to have a product called the M510, the Commscope M510 LTE access point. So it's an LTE, a 4G Wi-Fi bridge. And you put that on the bus and it basically makes it a hotspot. And you go driving into the neighborhood. Now, you don't want all the kids rushing to the bus to get connected, because now you're worried about safety and social distancing. So we put a couple outdoor APs mounted on the side of the bus and beam it into the neighborhoods, and now you can go a lot further, like 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet. So that's the idea of that. And you could do a number of things. You could park it overnight. You could run the normal route. You could run a scheduled route where you're going to be in certain neighborhoods at certain times and days, and people know to come out and get their work done. It's a very cool approach where you can get students' meals delivered to them. You could bring physical homework or pick up physical homework for those students who don't have connectivity at home and they need a way to do, like, packets. So a lot of people do packets and books. So you can do that. You could have a nurse or a healthcare professional on board with a thermometer or handing out gloves and masks and or sanitizer. And there's so many things you can do by just having that bus in the community.
Yep.
So we're seeing that as something that we said, how can we help you? That was one of the answers that came back. And so we had a little program where we're offering just whatever we could, one free outdoor AP, one free M510. One of our reseller partners here in Northern California worked with a local school district, equipped their bus. I think they did one bus, maybe two. Went really well. They were very happy with it. And they turned around and said, we're going to work with you. We're going to buy the rest and we're going to deploy our entire fleet of 80 buses. Right?
Wow.
Just because they went out and said, look, I'll give you some free equipment, I'll donate my time, I'll help you, prove out something, and they get rewarded for it. And I think that's the point, that's the lesson learned. If you invest in these relationships as a reseller, especially in public sector, especially in schools, it's the right thing to do and it will pay dividends.
Yeah, I think back to your point of just what can I do, be empathetic. A lot of teachers just are not used to, we as businessmen are used to Microsoft Teams and Zoom and doing these online meetings now. And a lot of these teachers teaching in classroom, 30, 40 students, just even helping navigate, how do I set up a Teams meeting? How do I do a breakout session for my students if I want to pair them up into 2 or 3? That shouldn't be lost on us as technologists. If we know that, and that's something we can communicate even at the teacher level and say, here's how I can help you. Don't overlook the little things, right?
Exactly. If you can be an extension of the IT team and help them with distance learning, I can tell you the stories I'm hearing from my kids. They're like, how do you like this teacher this year? And the first week it was, oh, Mr. Smith is an awesome math teacher, or Mrs. Jones is this great English teacher. And now this week they're like, I'm rethinking it about Mr. Smith. I said, why? And I said, well, he starts every class by complaining how he hates the technology and he can't get connected.
Brutal.
And it's like, yeah, we know, but you don't need to tell us. We have the same problems at home.
Poor Mr. Jones.
Poor Mr. Jones. Yeah.
Oh, man. All right, cool. So next question I had for you, and we're coming to a little bit of a wrap. So as the global director of education, what are some of the things you've seen worldwide that maybe the U.S. can learn from other countries, some of the best practices or things like that with schools? And go K through 20 if you want to. Don't just stop at 12.
No worries. No worries. Well, one of the biggest ones I point to is in New Zealand. And they've been in the news for the way they've handled the COVID epidemic. But the Ministry of Education New Zealand, they're very interesting. Years ago, and I don't know if many of your listeners remember this, but there was a massive earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand. And it just decimated most of the city. And when they rebuilt, they took the opportunity to say, look, this transition to digital learning is going to happen someday. What if we invested in it now? We already have to rebuild the buildings. We have to put in new infrastructure. They took that moment in time and said, we're going to make the leap and start doing it. And they did. And they invested in the right infrastructure, wired and wireless infrastructure. They started doing online learning way before other people did. And it became a showcase to the point where the ISTE organization was sending bloggers out to New Zealand to say, what's your secret? How did you get so far ahead of everyone else? Well, they started earlier, and so they learned faster than everyone else. And here they are again this year. Not only did they school the rest of the world on how they responded to the pandemic, but they're also launching a new program this year where they're refreshing their network infrastructure for digital learning. They're addressing digital equity. They put in fiber broadband out to all the different schools. They're putting new wired and wireless infrastructure in all the schools. They've moved to a centralized management system. They've upped their game basically to enable more video, more devices, more connections, more seamless roaming between school sites to better enable distance learning and on-campus learning. They take the opportunity when there's a crisis to invest in and how they're going to come out of it. I guess that's the way I look at it. They ask themselves, okay, I can't avoid it. What can I do to better prepare myself as I come out of it? And I think that's the best plan. That's the best way I would present it to a customer today. They're going to tell you I've got distractions. They're going to, and honestly so, I've got other priorities right now. I've got other things to worry about, but you're going to have to ask them, look, you're in this crisis mode right now. where do you want to be a year or two coming out of this crisis? Do you want to be digging out of a hole, or do you want to take the opportunity, as you said in the very beginning, Zach, there's nobody there. Do you want to take the opportunity to put yourself in a position that when you come out of this, you'll be in a better place?
Yep.
Or, you'll make it easier on yourself a year or two from now because you'll have prepared and done the work.
Long-term solutions for a near-term problem. I get it.
Exactly. Now meets
Cool.
next. Love it.
Awesome. All right. So this has been a great edition of AirWAVs podcast. Rich, I can't thank you enough for your time. Thanks for what you're doing for the education space. I think this has just been great. So ladies and gentlemen, Rich Nedwich, Global Director of Education for Commscope. Thank you so much, and look forward to more of these sessions with you in the future, and hope the family's safe and sound and you're doing well, sir.
You too. Thank you, Zach. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich.